Got it.
Oh, great. See a lot of people, and welcome to this LAF and LPPD joint venture in the webinar, the second webinar with Gwendolyn Galsworth on the maestra of visual thinking. This time we've chosen the title, The Hero Within, Eye-Driven Visuality. And this is very much a preparation for the upcoming workshops that Gwendolyn will be running in Helsinki. So please prepare your questions to challenge and to learn more. So Gwendolyn, the stage is yours.
Will I begin? Thank you. Thank you. And I will share. Watch how clever I am. Here we go. Now you can see. You see Superman, everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Carefully curated image to support our discussion today. So the discussion today will be drilling down into the kind of engine or the driver of visuality. And I want my controls to work. I'm just going to remind you that especially the two books in yellow and the one with the neutron on it, these are books that I've written about visuality, and they go into the mechanics. So if you're interested and you feel that this is too casual and you want more, these books are implementation manuals. But I would also invite you to the workshop that I'll be doing in Helsinki with these fine gentlemen. And during that workshop, we will be taking a deep dive into a number of the concepts and the methods that we are talking about today. We're looking at the broad theme of visual workplace, visual management. And I always like to begin with this question, and I've added something to it today, because I think it's an important one for everyone who is involved or interested in improvement, or even better, in transformation. And that is, the problems that face your company today may seem like big ones, big problems, but the question that we as transformational practitioners have to ask ourselves, are they our biggest opportunity? Do they really represent simply a solution or actually an expansion into a new horizon? Are they an opportunity or simply getting something solved? And I want to add to that this question, which is also a wide question, because we're going to be talking about drivers of visuality today, the biggest driver of visuality. And that is, how much will your associates contribute if you let them? And I say associates, operators, hourly employees, because they are the most neglected layer of our organization. They are where the power is least and where the opportunity is huge. It is no less huge than what we covered last week, which was visual leadership, no less huge than for an executive who starts to become a visual thinker, a supervisor who becomes a visual thinker, a manager. But it is just as powerful on the associate level. And the associate level is really not looked at as a level that can make a contribution, that can hit the bottom line, that can really make a difference. And people are mistaken in that. So visuality, one of the ways that we in my company describe what we do is we say, visuality, we grow leaders. Visual Thinking Inc., Visual Thinking Europe, we grow leaders because we grow visual thinkers. So this is a thinking paradigm. And what you see here is the result of that thinking. You see visual devices that actually represent the language of operations made visual and embedded into the living landscape of work. These aren't just devices that are really interesting, really beautiful, really clever. They serve a purpose, and the purpose is to capture the vital operational details, the informational details that would otherwise have to be passed or provided through speaking, through writing, through supervision, through micro supervision. They exist in the workplace because we have designed it so, because we have made it so. What you see here is many voices, and you see many, many levels of the organization. So it isn't just operators, but it is also operators. We talk about that, and this is going to be the kind of core of the workshop in Helsinki on the 5th, which is the doorway model, the 10 doorway model that I've been using for many, many years, which describes, and the book on the upper right, on the upper left, the yellow book, is the manual for operator-led visuality, doorway number 1. But this has to do with combining methods, visual categories of visual function, visual methods, and groups. Supervisors, engineers, managers are responsible for creating and then publishing timely, complete, and accurate standards and making them visual. Supervisors, planners, and managers are responsible for the schedule. They are responsible for the day-to-day problems in the workplace, in operations, in your streams of value, whether they be service values or product values, service streams or product streams. But they're responsible for surfacing the problems through visual displays. We should talk about this sometimes. Displays are not just about information sharing. They're about changing the information that you share. They are problem finding mechanisms. A whiteboard is a beginning, and you should praise it. Hooray, a whiteboard, better than that information being in my pocket. But it can go so much more further. It can really interact with you and with your direct reports. It can be a mechanism for digging deep into what is really going on and watching it much more dynamically and much more with much more richness than an LCD monitor can ever do. The LCD monitors just cut us off at the knees. They're helpful to share a certain level of information, but it's really hard to interact with them, and it's really hard to reimagine that pattern and get it to do something else. But visual displays do that. They're the responsibility of supervisors and managers, and on and on. We did Doorway 4 last week. We touched upon visual leadership. We talked about constructs and formats for that. Deeply embedded in that is also your problem-solving methodology. I give that decision to senior leaders, and senior leaders really understand that it is one of the most important decisions that they make, to vet, to find, and then to support the deployment of powerful visual problem-solving methodologies. And of course, metrics are in service of that. And on and on. Here we have our Pokeyoke, our machine, the office, the OPEX function, which is the macro environment, and for multiple plants, we have doorway number 10. So we looked here, but now we're going to look at all 10 doorways because we're going to be looking at the driver of visuality. I will not have time today to take you through the mechanics, obviously, but please come to the seminar and you can find out the exact mechanics for visual thinking. Okay? Where do we find the first call to leadership? This was a question that we had in our last webinar. Where do we find that first call to leadership in a visual transformation? It is in the leader's decision to undertake that journey. That's the first call to leadership. We ask this question: where do we find the first call to I-driven visuality, the subject of this webinar, in a visual workplace transformation? We find it in the thinking that undergirds the entire visual journey. And it's interesting why I can say that with the greatest of confidence. It is in the thinking that this mechanism of change that we call a visual transformation begins with thinking, because it begins with the brain. It begins with our brain function, which we all have, and it is Visuality's engine. So let me unnest this a little. The brain function is an engine, is the anchor point, is the generator of visuality. The only thing is, nobody told us. Nobody told us that 50% of human brain function is dedicated to finding and interpreting visual data. They also didn't tell us that that brain function, that 50%, is the part of the brain that is involuntary, automatic, and continuous. As involuntary as our heartbeat, as continuous as our heartbeat. Our brain is doing it right now as it is perceiving the screen, it is absorbing the screen, it is getting visual impressions, and it is creating out of that an interpretation. And we call that interpretation meaning. Meaning precedes action. The brain transforms data, the data that's hitting your eyeballs now, into information, that information into meaning. And that meaning is the very source of our beliefs and our behavior. It's that powerful. Do not underestimate it. Right now, all I want you to do is recognize it's there and recognize that it is the great ally for your company in transforming the workplace into one that speaks. You couldn't have a more powerful ally, and it comes with every employee. Imagine having an army of brain function seeking to embed into the living landscape of work, into the dynamic, ever-changing landscape of work, information that is ready for us to pull to us when and as we need it, whoever we are, whether we're executive or whether we're an operator, whether we're a supervisor or whether we're an engineer, whether we're in marketing, purchasing, accounting, everyone, and everyone in between. It's big. So I want to kind of focus right now onto the I, because this is the source of the I right here. This is the power. And it is connected to our will. This being able to interpret visual data, to find it and interpret it and derive meaning, informs our will. But I want to tell you that the opposite is also true. If there is no visual information shared in the workplace, the brain will still seek it, only it will get a little tired. And after a while, because it isn't there, that need of the brain, that function of the brain, it's not even on the level of need, because the brain will make something of nothing if nothing is all you present to them. That is why people make stuff up. We have the will to contribute. We have the will to devise and to invent and to solve. And if we don't have any help, we'll make stuff up. Sometimes we get a great invention out of that. Sometimes we get a mess. Okay, so know the brain function is there for you to harness, to take advantage of. It's willingly given, but you need to have the concept of a workplace that speaks so that it can speak, so that you begin to infuse it with visual information sharing. So Charles Dickens wrote a really wonderful book that became many wonderful movies called called David Copperfield. And he used to get paid by the word, so it's a very thick book. But the book begins with these words: I wonder whether I shall turn out to be the hero of my own life. I stumbled upon this, I don't know, was it 20 years ago? And I had a number of experiences in which this came up in front of me, where people asked me, they said in so many words, I'll tell that story in the workshop. It's a little long for today. This is deeply embedded in us, that we want to contribute. We want our lives to count. Dickens is saying this in a way that to us is dramatic, but it wasn't to him. That wasn't an astonishing opening line back in the 1800s, but it is to us now because we know how hard it is. What would it be like if we went to work and could be a hero? Is my flip on it. What would it be like if the job of executives and managers, as they begin to configure their vision, their mission, was, my job is to make a hero out of everyone who reports to me. That's my job, because that's what I want for myself. Brain function is why visuality is eye-driven, because it's an internal resource and it is always at our disposal. It is also always active. It is natural, given ability given to each of us, inborn, and I love this next word, unlearned. You don't have to train people. You have to help people harness that brain function. And harnessing it requires cultivation, resources, methodology. There needs to be a framework of thinking. There needs to be a step-by-step system to harness that, to cultivate it. And there need to be decisions by decision makers. You need to resource it. And one of those resources, which we'll talk about in the next webinar, will be the resource of time. Don't fool yourself. Don't believe people who say that it can happen in 2 seconds. You can get something in 2 seconds. Can you get a transformation? We look to leaders for that. You have to hold on. You have to hold that frame. You have to hold that structure. It is the structure of choice, and that choice is a leader's choice. And the commitment to that choice is what holds the whole stinking thing together when it wants to wiggle and disappear on you. Well, anyway, I have a lot to say about leaders, and I think a lot of help to give. You see at the top, it says respect every individual. What's so interesting about this phrase, and it'll lead to the next piece and then the next. What's so interesting about this phrase, this principle, it's a very important principle in the Shingo model, and in many companies' models about what is our relationship with the individual who comes to work. But it was translated from the Japanese. A more accurate translation of the Japanese, which I find very interesting, is this. It actually says respect humanity. It was a little bit too much for the Western mind when I think about it. I was there when this stuff got translated, and I never saw this one. I never saw the miss on this one. We missed a lot of stuff, and it caught up with me later, and I understood it. But this one means we're really looking at the human condition. And when we demonstrate respect, which visuality is, because we are respecting that capacity in each of us to find and interpret visual data, and we're helping you design what that data will be. That is respecting the humans, the humanity. Corporate decides to cultivate that power within each of us, within every individual, and gets to decide, as I mentioned before about problem solving, gets to decide how are we going to do that? For me, in my life and in my work, that visuality is the how. I have found no more powerful how to trigger, to cultivate, to provide, to grow a workforce of thinkers who use visuality as their base, because it's a natural fit. Again, our picture of visuality in actions. These come out of thinking. I know where each and every one of these came from, except these 350 Hijunka boxes that you see down here that Art Burns had already at Wiremole when I arrived. 350 Hijunka boxes that were loaded every day. Nothing was done by email. It was all real. It was physical. And man, it worked. It was a prize-winning company, really just transformational. So let's look at the eye in the context of how can it be used as an engine? Well, plainly put, there is one simple reason why a visual workplace is needed. And that is because people have too many questions. Here's the tricky thing about questions. Only some of those questions are asked. Most of them aren't. And I'm going to just represent the United States here, since I know it very well. In the United States, we don't ask questions because we don't want to look dumb. We don't ask questions because we don't want you to look smart. We don't ask questions because we've already asked them once about 15 years ago and I didn't get the right answer then. Why should I expect it now? We don't ask questions because we think we're smart enough to make stuff up and do it on our own, whatever the heck it is. We are a nation of entitlement and competition. You know the United States. I do too. We have a lot to learn from my country. And I learned about this. I learned about, wow, questions. Why don't people get their questions answered? You know, this is in a company that has not gone through any transformation. You get this kind of attitude. But what's so interesting is that when folks don't ask questions, this is me, I'll talk about me. I do nothing or I make stuff up. And sometimes that's a good thing, gets me off the dime, but sometimes I make a mess. I've made many, many messes here in Poland. It's not my fault. I make stuff up. I got to put something together. But when we look at, I'm having a great time. I will tell you that I am having the time of my life. I decided to move to Europe and I'm here and I'm telling you, I am a new person. Everything is new and refreshed and wonderful. When we look at the questions from the point of view of a transformation, there are only 3. I'm going to give you one of them today and the other 2 when I see you at the conference, because there's just not enough time to dig in. The 2 questions, here are the 2 main questions. I'll give you the third one. The third one is why, and that belongs to the executive and then cascaded down. But here's the first 2 of what I call the driving questions. The first question is, what do I need to know? Let's blow that up. What do I need to know that I don't know right now in order to do my work? In the visual workplace, we ask and answer that question as a concept, as a principle of visuality. And our answer is in the form of a visual device that holds that information and we pull that information to us. We have a question, we ask it once, second time we ask it, there's a little formula for this. We turn it into a visual device so that it's there when and as I need it, and I pull it to me. When and as I need it, I pull it to me. I pull it to me. And what I get out of that is I get control out of my corner of the world. I get control of my corner of the world. I get control of my corner of the world. That's all I want. I want a little bit of control. That's all we all want. This is a driving question. In my methodology, we don't use it as a step, but we use it as a concept. But many people, and I would invite you to do it, take this question home with you and use it tomorrow. Take it to work with you and use it tomorrow. If you're a supervisor, give it to a small group of people so you can see how it works. And you say, hey, this is what I want you to do. We're going to meet in the morning. I want to know 5 things that you need to know. What do you need to know that you don't know right now in order to do your work? Or you can do it on the spot. And then people will come up with some kind of visual devices. It will not create a transformation, but it will give them relief. And that's what you want. You want to take that pressure off the human psyche, the human brain, the human ambition, if you will, that part of us that wants to be a hero, and let people experience some small aspect of that by simply getting their own questions answered through a visual device so they can pull it to them. And then they're going to turn to you and tell you what you need, what they need to know from you. But I want you to notice that I, you got that this is a pull system, right? That I is not a we. It doesn't say what do we need to know. Now I'm going to say this provocatively. Come to the workshop and get a better answer, but it's a provocative one. Visuality is not a team sport. It is not created by we. It is created by I. You have the power of the I, the power of this integrated individual who knows his or her job so well. And there are some gaps, knows exactly what they're missing. There's more to be said about this. Let me show you, this is a before. Rick L., master machinist. This is hardcore manufacturing. And we ask ourselves right here, can you see the information? Can you see the information? Because, you know, it's there. Can you see it? It's there. Rick got a hold of the methodology, work that makes sense, and he went through his transformation, and this is how he let the workplace speak. This is how he found the language of his production. This is what we call expert level or green level. But he did this, and there's wonderful stories about Rick's journey, which I love to share, perhaps too much. So we're making this connection between information deficits, which you see here, a mute, dumb workplace, and a workplace that speaks. Missing information, full of motion. Remember that from last week? Full of motion. And now the motion has disappeared. And you know, I asked Rick, I said, you know, people are saying they love to work in your cell. This was a 3-shift operation, and first shift owns the landscape. They would sign up, they would bid for his cell. They call it the no thinking cell. Rick, what do you think about that? I mean, you're a great visual thinker. What do you think about people? What do they do when they come to your cell? He said, you know what they do, Gwendolyn? They don't have to think. All they have to do is dance. They do the dance of work. He's talking about flow. He's talking about connectivity, and he made it so. This is just results from, now this is high variety, low volume. High variety, low volume at, Brant Engineering in Canada. And this is what happened with Stuart, an ace visual trainer, with Stuart's application. These kinds of numbers. And this is what he said, the more the process became visual, the more production velocity increased. We'll tell that story as well. So you can see it in very, very low volume, high complexity. Lockheed Martin, another amazing visual transformation. There's more to this story, but I'll just give you the short form, which is LMARO that's Lockheed Martin, wanted to discover what Visuality could do by itself without any lean tools. They wanted to run the experiment. They ran it at their skunk works in Palmdale. This is a picture. This is an allowed picture because it's very high secret, high confidentiality. Okay. And what they did is 7 months later, they were overhauling their best jets because it was an experimental site. They had a 15% productivity increase. We always see 15, we often see 30, but they also had a reduction of 700 hours of labor content per unit. The unit is the plane, and a complete payback on that 1,000 hours in 7 planes, in 7 units. This is eye-driven visuality. This is the power of the eye. Imagine if the answers to all the vital questions in your company were visually embedded into the living landscape of work. What would you do with all that liberated time? What would your company do? What would you become? What would your company become? Okay, so thank you. Join us at the workshop. We'd love to see you. And now let's open for questions. Thank you.
We can see if we have any spontaneous questions. Can take them directly.
Peter has a wonderful plan for helping questions come up.
So right now we don't have questions. So Joa, please.
Okay, you have.
We can't hear you. Plan. We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I thought I unmuted myself, but thank you very much, Gwendolyn, for the great presentation.
Thank you for the thank you.
We will now go to the breakout sessions. So we have 10 minutes time to discuss what we just heard and saw, the visuality, of course, very important. I will do 3 groups.